Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another episode of our Let's Talk Arsenal series. I'm joined by the Evening Standard Simon Collings. How you doing, mate? You good, Joel?
I'm very good, thanks. How you doing?
Yeah, not bad, not bad. I'm hoping that people can see me all right. I'm getting an indication in the corner of my screen that I might be experiencing some internet problems. Is it coming across blurry to you? Is like a terrible connection?
I can see you and I can hear you, so I mean it's good for me. So
That's
hopefully
all.
others
That's all
can.
that matters. That's all that matters. Lovely stuff. Good evening, everybody joining us in the chat. Hope you're doing good. Hope you're well, and thank you so much for joining us as always, Simon. It's been a pretty enjoyable start to the season. You know, covering Arsenal every day is both a privilege and a curse at times for us. But it's been pretty fine to kick things off.
It's been really good, and I think, as you say, people sometimes sort of don't realise that when you're in the club day to day, as we are, it's difficult when things are going bad because people are the same as in any work environment. When things aren't going well, people aren't happy, and the mood around the club, everything. I mean, we've seen it with supporters, but I think even from dealing with the club day to day and Arteta and the players, you can feel how different this season is. And watching back on Amazon, you could see the stark contrast, couldn't you, between the start of the season and this start of the season? And long may it continue.
Absolutely. It's been enjoyable. It's been filled with goals and great football, and most of all, kind of the appreciation of the transfer business that we've managed to do. I mean, Gabriel Jesus and Zinchenko coming in. It's mad to think that only, 4 years ago in 2018, when we watched Arsenal lose to Bournemouth 2-1, with a team that was very different in terms of what it looked like. I think only Granit Xhaka, of course, has kind of carried over from that team in terms of a starter. Everything else has all changed. Do you think it's impressive to see how much the kind of the recruitment has leveled up this Arsenal team over the last couple of seasons or so?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this the other day, and I was trying to think of a window where Arsenal have got their business done so early and so well. Normally we'd be talking now, what are we, sort of a week to go in the window, and saying, Arsenal's still got quite a bit to do. And admittedly, I'm sure we'll get onto it, that they could add a wide player or maybe a midfielder, but you're looking at one signing. You're not looking at major surgery to the squad. And I think Zinchenko's been brilliant for me. He's arguably been the unsung hero and best player so far. But I think that Jesus signing was absolutely crucial because before the window started, everyone said Arsenal need a striker. That's got to be done. And they got their number one target and they got him in before they played their first pre-season game. And to be in that position, I think really set the tone for the whole window. And, credit to Edu. I think he's come under criticism in the past, rightly so, I think. But in this window where he'd probably argue it's his first proper non-COVID window, I think he's done pretty well on incomings. Outgoings, maybe not so good, but I think you can't argue with the players that have come in.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, let's tackle outgoings because at the moment, Arsenal, of course, are trying to move on the last few surplus players, to put it politely. Some of them, I think Ainsley Maitland-Niles has been around a long time. There's been times where possibly we could have accepted bids for the likes of Wolves in the past, and we may look back on that now with regret. Hector Bellerin, of course, is still trying to work out his future, and Nicolas Pepe is potentially moving on to Nice. But we've done business prior to that as well. But we've seen, Bernd Leno move on for a £3 million upfront fee with like 5 million quid worth of add-ons, which is, when you consider the player that he is, and certainly the performance that he put in, against Brentford the other day, pulled off some brilliant saves and some good work out from the back as well. Seems like a mental amount of money. Guendouzi going off for 9 million, Mavropanos going off for like £2 to £3 million. It seems as though we still can't address this sales reputation. Do you think that is something to point the finger at Edu with criticism, or is there a semblance of sympathy that the players we're moving on weren't his responsibility regarding bringing them in, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's got to take some responsibility for some of the outgoings. I think part of it is dictated by the market and the players' situation, and we saw that a bit in the documentary. With the whole Aubameyang situation and Edu and Arsenal realising quite quickly there wasn't really a market for him, and I think some of these players has been a bit of a victim of that. Struggling to find clubs that are going to want to take players. A lot of these players on big wages, so Arsenal haven't really been in the position where they've been sort of rejecting bids for players that they want to keep hold of. It's more clubs coming, them trying to force them on clubs, which is never a good position to be in when you're selling. But I think that there is definitely a case for them being able to extract more value. And I wonder, I think I always look at Liverpool as a sort of golden example for a club selling well. And look at even this summer, look at someone like Minamino, 17 million. I think Neco Williams was around the same sort of price. And I think they have the advantage of when you get to being, the number 1 or 2 team in the Premier League and you're selling your sort of quote unquote squad players, they have a sort of set value and price. And I think if Arsenal start being a Champions League team again, start being a team that competes for titles, I think you'll see those players who are on the periphery, suddenly people will be going, well, hang on, they're coming from one of the best teams in the country. They're going to demand a certain fee. Whereas at the moment, I think it's difficult when you're trying to sell into that market, and particularly the COVID market we're operating in now, where people don't have very much money. But yeah, I think if people had jotted down on a bit of paper what they thought they would have got from outgoings, I don't think the club have hit that target.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the judgment will certainly be next summer a lot more stringent on that, because I think that the players, of course, that are going to be around next summer will be very different. Pepe will likely return from that loan unless, of course, needs to activate any kind of option, if that is indeed included. And we're not 100% sure on the finer details of that just yet. But there is scope with potentially, Rob Holding's future being up in the air probably next summer. I imagine that he will probably stay this season and be kind of that 4th choice for Arteta and be involved in a lot of kind of the cup games and rotation, and has done a very good job when called upon at times for us. You've got obviously players like Nuno Tavares, who potentially may not have a future at the club if Zinchenko and Tierney are to stay. And alternatively, if Tierney is frustrated by lack of opportunities, who knows what might happen with his future. So I suppose next summer it will be when we kind of really look at the sales department and what kind of money starts coming in for the players that have been bought more recently under the current regime. There is, of course, still a lot of business to do, it seems. Arteta is very open, and as he has been, and as he's spoken to the media in the press conferences about the idea of doing more. He spoke after the game against Bournemouth saying that they're aware that they need more firepower, is the interesting word that he used. I thought that was quite telling, actually, kind of especially with the forward line that we've been discussing. And, me and you were talking a little bit off air about how it's been very quiet regarding kind of incomings over the last month at least. And this Pedro Neto news that has come out recently, with David Ornstein being the first to break that, was a little bit of not only relief, I think, to really kind of get that idea of who Arsenal are really going for, but also because it's another Premier League footballer with established kind of experience. And I'd love to know kind of your thoughts around Neto and how you view him as a potential target.
Yeah, I think he very much fits the profile of player that Arsenal have gone for, not only this summer, but the summer before, of being at that age where you can see the growth and potential in him, but he's got a level of Premier League experience that I think makes him a desirable player to bring in. And I did wonder, we knew that Arsenal wanted to do more business. And as you say, it had gone very quiet and everyone was sort of trying to work out, do they want a midfielder? Do they want a winger? Who do they want? And, news like this coming out, I think sort of 7-8 days from the window to go, I think is probably a sign that Arsenal, if they're going to do business, they know they need to accelerate it in this week. And I think Neto is a player who would improve the squad. And I look at that forward line that's starting at the moment with Martinelli, Jesus and Saka, and what they're bringing in terms of energy on and off the ball, work rate, everything is fantastic. And I think you can bring in, Smith Rowe, you can add to that. You can bring in Eddie and add to that. But I think if you wanted another winger who really offered what Neto and Saka do, what Saka and Martinelli do, then I think Neto is someone who fits that bill, because I think Smith Rowe is quite a different player to that. And Eddie obviously naturally wants to play through the middle. So I wonder when Arteta was talking about firepower, if he meant a dynamic winger who could come in for Saka or Martinelli, because I do think if Bukayo Saka got injured, and Nicola Pepe's obviously leaving, I don't really think there's anyone who can replicate that role. Smith Rowe could play there, Vieira could play there, but they're not going to do what Martinelli and Saka do. So I wonder if that is the thinking with it. And for me, it makes a lot of sense. The one issue, which I think has been pretty widely reported, would be the price. And £50 million seems like a lot of money, but whether there's room to negotiate there, I think we'll find out over the next sort of 8-9 days.
How do you view the price in terms of kind of how it measures up to the player that you're getting into Neto? Is that too much of an ask, or is Arsenal, would Arsenal be within kind of the realms of not necessarily realism, but just what's appropriate, I suppose, to go and pay. Because they've clearly this summer, you know, you look at what they did with Rafinha and with Lissandro Martinez, they weren't willing to go to a certain figure with those guys. Do you think now with the window as where it is and the stage that it's at and the need as well with potentially Pepe leaving, that they might be more willing to push the boat out a little bit more financially? And is it fair to?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one because they've obviously spent a lot of money, and I also think the outgoings haven't been probably as great as obviously, you know, supporters and the club themselves would have thought. When we knew they always wanted a winger, didn't we? We saw the Rafinha interest in the bids going in, so we knew that winger position was something they wanted. But we have seen, as you say, that if the price isn't right, Arsenal are quite happy to walk away. And also, we've seen, you know, if they can't get who they want, I think January was a prime example of that. They are happy just to keep their powder dry and just say, well, we won't sign anyone. And I think they are in quite a strong position with Wolves to say, look, you know, we're not going to break the bank here. You know, we have got a strong squad. We have got ways to facilitate, you know, being without players in it. For me, when I first saw the price being sort of 50 million, felt a little on the high side. But then when you look at the market, it's difficult because, you know, Wolves will argue, you know, we sold Morgan Gibbs-White, who's got 1 Premier League goal, 12 Championship goals last season, and they got £45 million for him. So they're going to argue we've got Pedro Neto, who's a Portugal international, was their player of the season 2 years ago. He's got 5 years on his contract. You know, they're going to be in the same position to Arsenal saying, you know, we're not under pressure to sell here. So with a lot of these things, I think if it was to be more palatable, I think, you know, you're looking at things like add-ons and the way you can structure the payments and not be playing all that front. But I think 50 million for me, for a player who's possibly not a guaranteed starter, feels like a lot. It's whether Arsenal think the same.
Yeah, I made the comparison with it being kind of similar to when Liverpool made the Diogo Jota signing, ironically, of course, very similar in terms of nationality and the club that he's coming from too, and versatility, because he can play on the left, can play on the right. He is left-footed, but he's developing kind of that right-footedness in his game from playing on the left quite a lot. He has played in the middle as well. I think in that season that he played in 2021, he operated on like 7 or 8 games. I think he played through the middle that season. So both as a centre forward, as kind of behind the striker, as well as more of a 10 or a second striker. So that versatility is quite similar to the Jota signing. Of course, they paid, I think, around £45 million for him. And he's obviously been a great asset to them, but he was further along the line in development than Neto currently is, and was probably less of a risk than you would say Neto is for 50 million. So I can see the reservations, and I, you know, have my reservations, but I also think I have the confidence from seeing what Arsenal have done this window that I feel as though they wouldn't overpay, or at least if they were to go to that level, that, as you say, add-on structures would be in place to financially benefit Arsenal, because that is something that's changed quite a bit. The other big name, as we know, is Youri Tielemans, who has not had the best of times. I'll be very honest, like I haven't necessarily been impressed by his performances over the last season and this. I haven't said he's been the same as he was the season before that and through until he was, of course, signed by Leicester from Anderlecht. So what do you? Oh, it was from Monaco, of course. He came from Anderlecht originally, and then Monaco after. What do you make of this one? Just to talk about him as a player before we kind of go into the details of the transfer. But as a player, is he someone that you think would, as I describe it, push the needle of quality in the Arsenal midfield?
He's someone I personally, really like as a player. I think I wrote about him before the Leicester game. And I'm sure we'll get onto the price and, you know, the situation he finds himself in. But I felt like in that Arsenal midfield, I don't know if they've got a player like Tielemans, who they've obviously got, you know, your Odegaards and your Xhaka, who's playing very high this season. But for me, Tielemans is sort of a player who can dictate the tempo. He can sit a bit deeper. He sort of controls the rhythm of a game. A bit more of a quarterback type player than Odegaard, who wants to play high up the pitch. And I felt like that was something that wasn't really in the squad. And also felt like, just sort of in terms of forward planning, you know, on Nene's, we know he's got that 1-year deal with an option. Whether you want to take that up in a year's time remains to be seen. Granit Xhaka has 2 years on his deal. He'll have 1 year on his deal. Next summer, he'll be 30 years old. Is that the time you think, you know, you cash in? So suddenly, if you're losing 2 midfielders, there's a spot in the squad for Tielemans. And my sort of argument in the piece I wrote was that if he's a player what I think is good quality available for sort of £25 million, £30 million, the chance to do a bit of forward planning and get him in now. I was all for it. That was my suggestion. If Arsenal did one bit of business, I would go and do that deal. Not necessarily because I felt they had to get a midfielder in, but because a deal like this with a player of that age, proven in the Premier League, I felt it was too good to turn down. But maybe there is optimism at Arsenal that if in a year's time his contract runs out, then they'd be at the front of the queue. Then I would worry if it was me that there would suddenly be a bun fight for him. Then though.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. It's interesting. I wrote a piece this morning actually kind of just trying to put into words, I suppose, the concerns I have with it. It's not that I don't think Tielemans is a good player. Like, I think that he is. And I think that actually a move to Arsenal has the potential to see kind of that level return to what we were used to seeing him play at Leicester, because he's got that freedom. He's back where he's where he wants to be. He hasn't got kind of these social issues going around the outside about where he might go after a transfer. But the reason why I have kind of this reservation is just I feel as though if we do invest in that kind of box-to-box kind of player that Tielemans is, we are committing to him, for the next 4 to 5 years. And the thing that holds me back is that I think, could Arsenal do better? And with these expectations that Arsenal, if we're being real, they're looking, whilst we joke about title challenges now and stuff, and obviously the ambition is to get back into the Champions League first, the end goal has got to be getting back to challenging for titles and being on the level of Liverpool and Man City. And you'd hope that that would be within the length of potentially a contract that you hand to Youri Tielemans. So do you think it's a fair position? And you can completely tell me I'm wrong. I can take it, trust me. People tell me all the time. But do you think it's fair to have that resistance about whether or not we could potentially maybe in 2023 sign an even better player than Tielemans, but by signing him now, we then commit to that player that maybe we could have gotten even a better one for, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think he is certainly the age you're signing a player like that for the long term. It's not like you're signing, I was going to say, it's not like you're signing a 30-year-old, but United have signed a 30-year-old for 5 years. So maybe that's a bad example, but it's a long-term signing, and it's in a key position, isn't it? Those midfield roles. And we obviously see the value the club places in Odegaard with him, becoming captain. So there is an argument for that, and perhaps that is part of the reservation at Arsenal, because they do, as is well known and reported and documented, are interested in Tielemans, but they haven't pulled the trigger. And whether that is because they're not quite 100% sure on a player and they don't want to go down and invest that money, maybe that's the case. But for me, it still feels like a deal that would be good to do. But it is a case, I suppose, if you're arguing about the sort of the quality of the player. And if Arsenal are thinking of being a title challenging side, why is it, Liverpool crying out for a midfielder? Why are they not going for Youri Tielemans? Why isn't there this big clamour of clubs going for him? And for people who argue that he's not going to be the quality that Arsenal want in a year's time, that's probably something they'd say, that, look, it only really seems to be Arsenal in for him. Apparently he's a great price. Why is no one else bidding for him?
Yeah, and it's a fair one. The only thing I can come as a reason is because clearly the established link with Arsenal seems to be so clear that if another club was to come in, I imagine that Arsenal would probably pull the trigger sooner, thinking that they'd miss out. But for me, the reason why they've not necessarily yet is I don't think they're happy with the demands, I suppose, of Leicester for a player with just 1 year left on his deal. And they know that, of course, with the fixtures they have in August, as we are seeing, that they are very comfortable with the squad that they have to tackle those 5 fixtures. Beyond the window, of course, is a very different scenario. And so you can land, say, Tielemans on deadline day, and it hasn't necessarily affected our first 5 games because they're winnable fixtures. But that could, of course, change going forwards. So the price tag, £25 million, you've mentioned, you've obviously written about this. Do you feel as though, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but do you feel as though this is a deal that will creep towards happening before deadline or on deadline day?
I mean, at the moment, it doesn't feel like it's going to happen. It seems like Arsenal, they want to get a winger in, and Neto is a player they want to get in. I think, like you said, with the Tielemans deal, I think like you pointed to there, it was always going to be a deal that if was going to get done late in the window, I think, because of the contractual situation, because of Arsenal being actually quite well set in that midfield areas. And when you looked at the list of things Arsenal needed to do this summer, a new midfielder, I think, was lower down than getting your striker in, your left back in, addressing the centre of defence with Saliba coming back. So it wasn't going to be a priority. And with with Tielemans' contract situation, you're not going to go in there on the 1st of July and pay a big fee when you think you're in a good position. You can get him late in the window. You haven't paid for his wages for 3 months of the summer. So it's one that, could happen. It doesn't feel like it will at the moment. I do think Tielemans looks like a player who needs a move. I thought that playing against Arsenal, he didn't look quite right. He obviously didn't start the game at the weekend. And I wonder whether, if Arsenal don't, whether someone else comes in from on deadline day, and tries to get a late bit of business done, because if he's not going to sign that contract with Leicester, they've got to really move him on, unless they want to take the hit and just let him go for free in a year.
Do you think there's any surprises? Is the last kind of question on transfers, really, because we've seen Arsenal pull out random things in the past. It could depend upon if there's any major injuries in the next 2 games. The window's still open for that, I suppose. But do you foresee any kind of random moves, so like a right back or a left-footed centre back? Because Marie's of course gone, so Gabriel's our only player who's currently here with that role. Do you think there's any chance of a surprise one?
I mean, I don't feel like there's going to be a surprise, but then I mean, Fabio Vieira this summer, that was in the space of like 48 hours, we'd heard nothing about that, and then it was done. And even Tomiyasu on deadline day, last summer, that basically sort of in the morning it came out, and by the evening it was done. I think it could be a surprise in terms of the name. Maybe I think it looks like the winger is the position they want to strengthen. Maybe it'll be someone that we don't know about, and the Neto stuff plays out in front of it, and Arsenal get their business done quietly. But they've been most of their business this summer, they've been pretty good at getting it done without too much of a saga. I mean, the Tielemans one, yes, but that's kind of been a bit more of the interest. I think once we've sort of known about Arsenal wanting their target, I think with Jesus and Zinchenko, they've been pretty good at getting it done over the line. So it's going to be an interesting one, because about a few days ago, I was sort of chatting to people at work, and we were looking ahead to deadline day and saying, it might actually be quite quiet for Arsenal and Spurs. And now it might not be for Arsenal. But it's always the way, isn't it? It always looks like it's going to be fine. Then all of a sudden it sort of ramps up the interest. But I think at least, I think Arteta sort of touched on it in a press conference the other week. That, if Arsenal didn't do anything incoming wise, I think they would still be pretty happy with the window and satisfied with what they've done. And I think they'd be better just, if they can't get who they want, as history has shown us with Arsenal looking to get rid of these players in the current window, you're better off just waiting for who you want to get rather than just filling the squad with another body.
Indeed, yeah. I think, recruitment for the sake of recruitment is never going to be beneficial for this Arsenal 70. It's what we used to do. We used to recruit players sometimes for the sake of it. When we signed Nicolas Pepe for 72 million, yes, we needed a wide player, but we didn't need to spend 72 million pounds on where there were stark needs at central midfield and centre back at the time. Like, it just made no sense. I know that we desperately wanted to sign a Zaha during that time, but I just see such a different kind of measure to the way in which we recruit now, and the strategy behind it, of course. Let's start looking ahead then, because beyond the transfer window ending, of course, there's a couple of games left. And actually, this is what I think is a really interesting part of the season, because we've seen Arsenal be able to play the same lineup in the first 3 games, because it's been 1 game a week and there's been not many, fitness demands on the team. This time around, Arsenal have got, 3 games in the space of a week, because we've got Fulham, and then we've got Aston Villa, and then we've got Manchester United, the following weekend. How do you foresee kind of Mikel Arteta tackling these games? Because we have seen him use the same team 3 games in a row within the space of a week. I think he did it last season, starting off with the Southampton and West Ham games. I think we saw a very similar lineup, if not the same lineup, and it was in a short space of time. So how do you kind of see him tackling these? Do you think he will rotate the likes of Tomiyasu and Tierney and players like this in?
I think this might be the first time we do see a bit of rotation, and possibly it could be for the last of the 3 games that Arsenal have got coming up. Obviously, Fulham and Villa at home, I think, are fairly sort of similar fixtures that Arsenal have had for pretty much all their games so far, where they sort of dominate a lot of the ball and been very much on the front foot. So it's sort of made sense to have the same team. I think that United game could be a bit different, and it's interesting to see we've talked a lot about and written about, this idea of horses for courses and the defence having different options and playing different ways, and whether you go to a game like that, do you want to play your Tierneys and your Tomiyasus? I think Tierney is a better defender than Zinchenko, certainly one-on-one. And Tomiyasu obviously gives you that height in defence that you don't necessarily get as much with Ben White. So that, for me, I think could be the interesting game where we see a bit of rotation. But I think over the season there will be, particularly when the midweek game is Europa League game, I think we will see a lot of rotation. And, if you look at the team at the moment and who can come in, you're looking at a Europa League front three of being Smith Rowe, Nketiah and Fabio Vieira, which is pretty tasty, I think. But I would start to think now the rotation will slowly begin to happen. And also the players that will be rotated are now, fully fit, or certainly near full fitness, whereas before they were coming on to get a few minutes. I don't know whether Arteta really had a debate about whether to start them because they might not be ready to start games, but now they will be, and it's going to be interesting. And I was at that Bournemouth game on Saturday and thinking the strength of that bench and the players that are coming on. Compared to last season, you're looking at Tierney's coming on, Smith Rowe, Tomiyasu, Nketiah. The squad has transformed from what it was a year ago. And Arteta, I think he'll be relishing having these sort of headaches.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm relishing the thought of just seeing kind of what players are going to be dropped and who's going to come in. It's whilst I don't like the prospect of talking about the likes of Tierney and Smith Rowe's future being uncertain because they're not getting too many minutes, that in itself is a good thing, because it means these quality players are, that they're not getting into this side because someone even better than them is currently in the team that's better suited for what we're doing, which is, when you think about what our squad was like 3-4 years ago, is a very different style. I mean, not even that. I mean, you think back the end of last season where we had a bench made up of half youth squad players, the depth in this team has shot up dramatically. You mentioned Fabio Vieira there. I'm interested to kind of get your thoughts on him. I know that we've not seen loads of him. The Portuguese league is not one of those that's regularly broadcasted or able to catch glimpses, but we've seen a little bit of him in the under-21s now when he played that game. I know we've all seen kind of highlight reels of him, but he was a signing out of the blue. What kind of role were you expecting to kind of see him flourish in Arsenal?
Yeah, I think short term, I went on YouTube and watched the sort of highlights of his under-21s game. And I think he will do. I can see him in that Europa League playing that sort of right wing spot instead of Saka. I think if Nelson had been fit, it's an argument to say Nelson could have played there, and you could have played Vieira someone else. But I think now that is where he'll start. And I think you look at his size as well. Quite often players, young players, when they come in, they start in those wide channels. It's a bit less physical, a bit more time on the ball and playing in the middle of the park. Even centre forwards get moved out there. Long term, I could certainly see him playing in that one of those number 8 roles. I think Arteta himself said that he could probably play the role that Xhaka is doing, where he really pushes up the pitch. I think he could definitely do the role Odegaard does as well on the other side because he likes to cut in. I think short term, though, I reckon we'll see him on that right wing, and I'm excited to see him play there. Looks like a really exciting player, and it's probably actually quite good in a way that he's, I forget he's a £34 million signing, and no one's really banging on about him or heaping all this pressure on him. It's quite a good environment for him to come into in this situation. I can think of summers gone by where if Arsenal had signed someone for £34 million, there'd be a lot of pressure on him. If he wasn't fit, he needs to get back fit. He needs to get in the team. Whereas this time, it's actually quite nice. I think the environment he's got on Arteta doesn't have to rush him. He doesn't have to play him every game. They can actually just get him adjusted to English football, which I think will be beneficial for him this season.
Absolutely. I'm really excited to see what he brings. I think he's gone under the radar because he's just obviously not been involved in pre-season and what he's going to add. I mean, the fact that Arsenal still want to go out and add another wide player, the potential to see Smith Rowe and Nketiah, Vieira, a new player coming in, Lokonga as well has been on the bench, who I still rate, fairly highly. And I think there's more to come from him in this Arsenal team. Not to mention Marquinhos, who came in and is impressed with the 21s as well. So there's a lot of excitement going on, with the Arsenal depth right now, and Vieira is a massive part of that. For the last 10 minutes of the show, we're going to tackle some of your questions in the chat box. So do make sure you start throwing them in, and we'll try and tackle as many as we can. Do drop a like as well if you're enjoying it. You can follow Simon on Twitter at @SR_Collings. Make sure you do keep up to date with everything Arsenal going on at the Evening Standard. Manu says, what happens to our game if Jesus gets gets injured? Shouldn't we be going for a wide forward who can also play similar to Jesus instead of a player like Neto or Pino? I mean, it's interesting because I'd argue, I think, someone that Neto could arguably cover in the middle.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Neto, certainly in pre-season, when Jimenez got injured, he played a bit through the middle. And in the end, I think they opted to play Podence as a false 9 instead of Neto. But I think he can do that role. I think we saw last season that when the frontline forward gets injured, I think now Arteta would trust, if it got to the situation where Nketiah had to play 10, 12 games, I think Arteta now is complete faith to be like, that's absolutely fine, we'll do that. And then if you're going beyond that, you have to play Martinelli as a striker. I think it's pretty rare, I think, for a club in Arsenal's situation to have sort of 3 frontline forwards, out and out forwards, just because of the number of minutes they're going to get. So I think Arsenal are actually in a pretty good spot there. And I think, ideally, I do agree the wide forward would be good to play. Then I think Neto could do that, which is probably part of the attraction. But if they didn't get him in, I think you have Jesus. If he gets injured for a couple of months, touch wood, he doesn't. Nketiah plays there, or if not, you've got Martinelli as an option. So I think Arsenal are okay there.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at most teams, the options they have at centre forwards, if there is a third, it tends to be a player that can also play in a wider role. Chelsea had Lukaku and Werner there, but you had Havertz, and Werner and Havertz could play in those wide positions should they need to. You think back to, of course, this season now, things have changed. They look like they're bringing in Aubameyang, who, of course, as we know, can play in a wide position as well, and they've already got Havertz there. So it's going to be intriguing how Arsenal tackle that wide position. Hopefully it's someone like Neto for a reasonable figure, because I think it'd be a great addition. Byron says, putting you on the spot, if the squad stays as is, what position is realistically achievable?
I mean, I tipped them before the season as top 4, and I still think that should be the aim, really. I think they could push for third, but I think they should. This squad, looking at it, and I was looking a bit at the Liverpool obviously a great team, but I was looking at the squad last night, which has been hit by injuries, and the three that was playing midfield of Milner, Henderson, Elliott. You can see the difficulties they're having when players are out injured, but I do think this Arsenal squad has got serious depth now, and the money they've spent, for me, the aim should be top 4.
Agreed. My minimum expectation. Was it Aston Mac who was sitting next to Odegaard when he did the interview and said, look, minimum top 4, really putting and stick it on him. I love that. Chris P, thank you for the donation, says, with Tielemans, does the current lack of interest mean he's a risky investment we can upgrade on in a couple of years when he'll still be in his prime with 2 to 3 years left on his contract? I mean, is that a strategy in itself, buying players, having them for 2-3 seasons, you can then upgrade upon them and then move those other ones on?
I suppose with Tielemans, that is an attraction in the fact that if you're signing him for 25 million, you are probably quite likely to be making a profit on that, I would think. I mean, Leicester paid 40 million, and I think if he wasn't in a year in his contract, I think they'd be getting a lot more money than they would be now. And Arsenal do need to be in a position where they are selling better, and the players they are selling are better. And we sort of touched on it a bit earlier, didn't we, when we were saying, people like Smith Rowe not getting minutes, Tierney not getting minutes. I'm not saying that Arsenal want to sell those players, but if it comes to a point where you're looking at the squad of now 22, and you're suddenly going, you need to, you've got to get rid of Tierney, he's not playing, or you've got to get rid of Lokonga or Smith Rowe. These are players who are going to command good fees, and it is completely different. So, I think we've seen from the way Arsenal operate that they are thinking a bit like Liverpool do in terms of a resale value, and all the players that they brought in this window and the window before, if you wanted to sell in 2-3 years, you're selling at a good age with time on the contract, and you should get a good fee. So the days of Arsenal, buying sort of 30-year-olds or giving contracts 31, 32-year-olds to bring them in doesn't really look like the transfer strategy now.
Agreed. Definitely so. Rakevway says, hi, Tom. Are you going to be doing a Europa League live draw stream? If I did that, I think I may get divorced immediately, considering it happens when I'm at my wedding. So that would be quite the achievement. That said, the ceremony doesn't start till 1 and the draw's at 12. So who knows? Maybe I could cheaply just watch the draw whilst things are going on and waiting around. She's going to kill me if she's watching this. Amira says, good evening, Tom and Simon. Are some fans becoming obsessed with needing all our midfield midfielders to be goal scorers. Is that just the modern game or a fear from the lack of goals from last season? Good question, actually.
Yeah, I think it's partly out of the fact there was, a dearth of goals at midfield, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And also there was a lack of goals probably all over the pitch, really. I think if Arsenal had a which they should do this season, a goal scoring number 9 and a goal scoring forward line, I think those worries over lack of midfield goals would eradicate. I don't see many people looking at Liverpool's front three when they had, Salah, Mane, and being like, oh, they need more goals from midfield. But
yeah, absolutely.
I ended up writing about it today about the goals from the midfield, actually, and saying how they have unlocked it a bit, I think, because of Zinchenko and the way he's sort of dropping into midfield. Xhaka and Odegaard in those games, I think we saw them score goals last season. You can think of Odegaard against Brighton with that long-range deflected shot, Xhaka against Man United. But the goals they're scoring this season, they're all inside the box, and just the amount of time they're spending in the box, I think you will see a lot more goals from them. But Arteta, classically doesn't mind where the goals come from as long as they come. But I think there will definitely be more goals from the midfield this season.
Yeah, my level of respect for you, Simon, grew last week when you announced that Granit Xhaka had made it into your fantasy football team. That was quite the move, and it paid off.
It did. Yeah, that was slightly out of desperation when I was selling Leon Bailey and I was scouring the 5 million midfield.
And then Bailey got an assist this weekend, of course.
Which is classic, isn't it? But
bound to happen. Yes, yeah.
I'm waiting for Xhaka to hurt me and burn me, but.
Yeah, I had an awful weekend this weekend. I think only Haaland, Salah, and Zinchenko returned points to me. It was not a good week. So a friend of mine,
one of your best point scorers in your team. It's not
exactly. Yeah, a friend of mine had Diaz, Walker, Cucurella, Trent, and James as their back 5, and none of them scored over 1 point. So quite an incredible weekend for a lot of people this week. It was definitely interesting. But back to the point, Amir, about your question. It's interesting because not many teams, and you used the example of Liverpool, which is a great one. Manchester City, beyond Kevin De Bruyne, you don't necessarily see their midfielders scoring loads. I know Gundogan definitely contributes with goals throughout the season. Bernardo Silva does too. But I look at Odegaard kind of quite similar role to Bernardo Silva at times, the way in which he operates deeper, really good on the ball, vision, good at going forwards. But actually last season, Bernardo Silva scored 1 more Premier League goal than Odegaard and had the same number of assists. So it does kind of show you that expectation of Odegaard getting into double figures from midfield isn't a requirement. It's more so, as you said, Simon, the front 3 chipping in with more goals than we've seen before. We'll try and take one more from the chat box. Actually, there's more of a funny one from Raul. It says, how are we looking forward to seeing Leno and Mopé return to the Emirates with Fulham? I'm sure you've seen the meme of Tuchel and Conte's handshake being compared to Mopé and Leno meeting at Fulham. Well, it's interesting the business Fulham have done. I mean, we touched on Fulham, but it's interesting because, I remember when they came up from the Championship last time, they spent massive and they brought loads of players in. I think Jukanovic was the manager back then, wasn't he? And it just didn't work. I mean, what do you make of kind of the way in which they built things differently this time?
Yeah, I mean, that Fulham window has gone down in sort of folklore because, I mean, even Forest now are being described as doing a Fulham, aren't they?
Yeah.
And I think this time my cousin's a Fulham season ticket holder, and he's sort of argued that they've gone a bit too far the other way, where they haven't got as much of the business done as they'd wanted to. But I think they've been the players they've got in, certainly Pereira and Paulinho, look like players that are of real quality, and they've gone quality over quantity. I think Leno, we touched a bit on the price, but I think for the fee they paid for him is brilliant signing for a goalkeeper, and for the position they're in. I think is a great signing, and I didn't actually have to. We had to do a sort of prediction for the bottom 3, and I didn't have them in there just because I thought they had enough about them, and the business they're trying to do for the end of the window. Justin Kluivert, I think, would be another good signing. They kind of feel like, I know the owner of their Khan is obviously passionate and trying to invest money, but I think they got it a bit wrong last time and a bit scattergun. Whereas this time, I think Marco Silva, you can see his fingerprints on those signings, and they've actually been a bit more measured and calculated. And I think there'll be a tough test on Saturday. I think certainly a tough, one of Arsenal's toughest games so far, and Mitrovic looking in good form. So it should be a good game at the Emirates.
Yeah, so I think I've been talking about how the kind of weakest area of Saliba's game has been aerially, and that's kind of part of his game that he developed whilst at Marseille a lot more. He's got a lot better than he was, but it's going to be tested. Mitrovic is going to test them, and it's going to be an intriguing test as well about how it comes out. Because I think maybe some people might underestimate how the challenge could be. It could end up being Arsenal's most challenging game of the season so far, so that's going to be intriguing. Yeah, I didn't have Fulham in my bottom three either. I had Bournemouth, Nottingham Forest. This was a lot prior to a lot of the business, but I still think maybe the Fulham effect could still come in. And Southampton were my other one that I put in.
I think I definitely had Bournemouth. I think I had either Southampton or Everton, and I had Leeds in there, but Leeds I think have
look all right, don't they?
My myth, but yeah, they do look. I just thought selling the two best players, but they've actually sold their two best players and it looked like they've made the squad better. So credit to them for that. But be interesting to see on Saturday when we touched on defenders and changing, but we saw Mitrovic climbing all over Trent, didn't we? And whether you think, do you play Tomiyasu over Ben White, a bit more height? So yeah, it's nice to be in this situation where we're deliberating who should be starting as opposed to fearful because
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be Lissandro Martinez up against Mitrovic when that happens.
No.
That's for sure. That's going to be an interesting battle. Simon, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Really appreciate it as always. Tell people where they can find you and what you're going to be up to.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at @SR_Collings or standard.co.uk. I'll be following Arsenal home and away all season across Europe at home. So yeah, keep up to date with everything and fingers crossed it's going to be a good season. It's looking like it is. But I'm trying not to get too carried away.
It's difficult. It's tricky when things are looking so good. Yeah, whilst I won't be watching the Europa League draw on Friday, Simon certainly will to work out where his travels will take him.
I will definitely be watching it, yeah.
Have you got anywhere in particular that you're eyeing up that you're hoping for? Or?
I was thinking that would be very nice if I think there's a chance they can get Betis.
Yeah.
And possibly Bellerin could be back there.
Yeah.
A nice trip. Maybe early September, might still be warm. And I think it's great for the fans because I remember I just started covering Arsenal. It was when COVID had just hit in that season, obviously.
Yeah.
And all the trips that Arsenal had in that Europa League run, there was some, they would have gone to Molde. I think they had Olympiacos, Prague, and you think for all the fans, watching this draw, we'd all sat at home, weren't we, watching it? And it is a massive thing. And, some of my friends are West Ham fans and they were getting some stick because they're in the Conference League, but they were like, don't really care, going to go around Europe, watch our team play. And I think for fans, we've seen how good the away atmosphere is in the UK. I think the travelling Arsenal fans are going to really, really enjoy it this season.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's going to be an enjoyable season, fingers crossed. And who knows, maybe we'll be... Where's the final? Is it Istanbul? No, it's...
I think it's Vienna. I've got a weird feeling.
Oh, that's a great final location.
Vienna. I've got a weird feeling it's Vienna, 31st of May, I think.
It will be in the Puskás Arena, so Hungary. Is that not? Yeah, so there you go.
Well, I went there for England, England's game in June. Amazing stadium and a brilliant. I've been on two stag do's in that city, so I can confirm it is a brilliant city as well. So
I hope they weren't both yours, Simon. I hope
they were not both. No. But I can confirm. Yeah, it is a very well. That would be a brilliant final. Yeah, all the more incentive for Arsenal to get there.
Absolutely. We'll wrap things up just with this question from Penny when he says, when is the live event with Mike and how to get tickets? Yes, if you would like to attend the Gooners versus Cancer live event on the 2nd of September in North London, I will leave a link to that, not only in the chat box, I'll drop that in there now. But it's going to be a great night, hopefully. FK from Latte Firm, Sophie from the Highbury Squad, Harry from Chronicles of a Gooner, myself, and James Benge from CBS Sports are all going to be there to do a show. So come along, buy a ticket. It's only £5, and that £5 goes towards supporting the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society as well. So yeah, get involved. It should be a very nice evening, fingers crossed, after yet more wins ahead of that game against at Old Trafford, of course, against Man United on the Sunday. But it's a Friday night in North London. Definitely worth coming along. So yeah, get involved. Once again, Simon, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. I'm sure we'll see you back on the channel soon. And yeah, enjoy the draw. I'm sure you'll be watching along intently. Thank you, Chatbox, for tuning in. Do drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Do vote for us in the Football Content Awards. Just go to www.votefortgt.com and it will create the tweet that you need for you. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you again very, very soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.